A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
So let's turn our attention to the developments in the war-torn nation of Ukraine, where the Russian invasion continues to wreak unspeakable horrors and even the possibility of World War III. Insights into the horror of war with a special guest today, a doctor working in Ukraine. Dr. Rudi Myhovych is a neurologist and president of the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine. His organisation was working towards building a better health system before the war, but with the Russian invasion came a pivot to become an aid and logistics provider across the country, caring for both civilians and military, including in deoccupied and frontline areas. Well, Dr. Rudi Myhovych is in Australia as a guest of the Australian Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship. He, as I said, is president of the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine, and our absolute pleasure to welcome to 2020 Dr. Rudi. Rudi, welcome along.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and I will have to listen this skillet song again after our conversation.
Hey, Rudi, it's almost 2 years now since the invasion began. I wonder if you've got an overall reflection of your experience of the war so far.
Yeah, actually there's many thoughts because it's unprecedented circumstances and situation, not for only Ukraine, but for the world. And the world is changing, the world peace is changing, and as you mentioned, yes, we have to talk about possibility, and it's not just some theory of World War III, because this what's going on in Ukraine, it's not only about Ukraine and Ukrainians. It's showing that any dictator can come and occupy the territory, and the world will just watch and wait.
And of course, if the conflict goes beyond the borders of Ukraine and into any of the NATO nations, that's the thing that could spark the World War III. Is this something that ordinary Ukrainians think about what happens if Putin succeeds and Ukraine is invaded, and the possibilities of Russia going even further?
Look, as a doctor, there are such things that you cannot have mistakes. As a surgeon, you don't have another mistakes to do another operations when it's complicated. And I would put this question also in such perspective. We already have lessons from the history, and Russia didn't show the peacefulness. They occupied some of the territories in 2014. Crimea and Donetsk. They occupied Georgia in 2008. They occupied part of Moldova. They had a war with Chechen. Also, we're covering the terrorist attack, but if you're gonna learn more in details, everything what was going on, it's about just occupation. And we Ukrainians, we didn't believe that Russia is gonna attack full-scale invasion. It's 21st century. What's the point? But it happened. And we can see from their propaganda television, they already talking that they are fighting not with Ukraine, but with NATO. And in social polls, the biggest enemy is NATO, not Ukraine.
So World War III is as close as the Russian attitude to the war, which is not just about the occupation of Ukraine, but, as you say, war with NATO, all of those different states that are a part of the NATO states. Let me ask you about your role as a doctor. With all of the bloodshed, the injuries, I wonder if you've got a reflection on what your role has been over these past 2 years in your position as president of the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine.
So since the first day, I had to stop my practice and work as a president of CMA because I've been more useful in this position, and by God's mercy, we've been able to bring goods for more than $150 million worth. It's roughly. It's and other amazing thing about education, and I can bring more changes and good on this position than just to be a doctor. And yes, definitely, we see the amount of injury and patients is just enormous. It's not a COVID, it's something that we have never faced. And world, we have a great work and collaboration with plastic surgeon from the States, one of the best plastic surgeons in the US, and they are coming to operate on war injury, and they facing the trauma that is horrible and so complicated, so difficult. So yes, it's been massive.
So what you're saying is that there are doctors, there are surgeons who are coming into Ukraine and let's say from different places all over the world because they recognise the need is so strong there. The sorts of injuries, and I'm not sure how graphic you can be here. I think you've got a free rein to just let us know what's the truth of what's going on. But what sort of injuries are presenting themselves most? Say when there's been a bombing or people coming back from the front line. What sort of injuries are you dealing with?
So as Russia mined every field, not every kilometer, but every square meter, the amount of money that Soviet Union is prepared right now is using a lot. Second, it's drones. This is a new war that war have never done and America have never faced before, the drone war. And small, big drones, they are using constantly both sides. And other countries are a lot helping to Russia in the drone direction. So this, and of course artillery. So a lot of amputations, a lot of explosions, a lot of not so many gunshots, because as I mentioned, to have a close fight, you have to went through minefield, drone field, to all other artillery shots and survive to have a close gunfight. So most of the time it's this, and you can see from the explosions, it's dramatically big injuries.
Do we know, Rudi, what the death toll is so far on the Ukrainian side or on the Russian side? You might have a good indicator from your position as to what those numbers might look like. The death toll, I want to ask you about the injuries because this is where you come into play as a doctor, but do we know what the death toll is at this point?
So from Russia side, they have more than 300,000 death people, but they are not valuing those people because it's prisoners and mobilized men are from occupied territories. The fear is a big weapon. If they are coming to Ukrainians that are under occupation and telling we're going to kill you or you're going to go to the front and you will have possibility to survive there or killed by Ukrainians. We're going to kill you 100%. So they are not valuing the life. Ukrainians' losses by official representatives, they are smaller. We don't know exact numbers. It's still big. I don't want to tell the numbers because it's a little bit private conversation and information that cannot be shared, but it's big numbers. But this is a price that we are paying for freedom. We don't have other choice.
And I think our listeners will appreciate that there are sensitivities and there may be some things you might not be able to share, and we'll ask the questions, but you'll know what you're able to deliver without compromising any security. I guess what I'm getting to, so far as the numbers of the dead, is that even though you're working with the wounded and you're treating those who have suffered horrendous wounds in war, that for each person who has died in the conflict, that leaves a family without a husband or a father or a mother. And that obviously has a huge effect on the nation. How do you, if we're sort of checking the pulse of Ukraine, how do we feel about the loss of life and the loss to families that means?
It's complicated. I personally lost a couple of friends during this war, and it's complicated. And I just yesterday there was prison exchange with people from Ukrainian soldiers that had been captured in Russia, on Russian soldiers. And there was one man who were defender of Mariupol, the city in Ukraine that right now under occupation. And they were fighting together with his wife. And they had two children, two daughters. And the wife was released faster, like a year ago, from the capturedness, and the husband was released yesterday. But when he made a call to his daughter or to his family, he discovered that rocket a couple of months ago hit into Dnipro city and killed his wife and younger daughter. So right now he released soldier, and you can imagine only by this story, when I was reading it just broke my heart. And we have similar story when rocket trapped in the building and killed daughter, child, and wife, and father went to army and also died with the time. So it's absolutely crazy.
These are tragic stories, and as you say, you've personally lost friends. As I understand it too, Rudi, you also lost a pastor of recent times. Was it your pastor that was killed?
Not my personal pastor, but yes, pastor. They are serving as a chaplains on the front, and they sometimes really hostile because the moral, spiritual support is extremely important. The war, this is a place where when devil is working a lot, and there are no quietness. The explosion and shots is all the time. So to have inner peace is so important, and have motivation. Sometimes it's even more important than to have a weapon. Because when you have motivation and inner peace, you can fight. But if you have a big tanks, but you don't have inner peace, you can lose the fight.
I want to talk to you some more about that inner peace, because in a nation that is war-torn, and sometimes we're familiar with this terminology, shell shock or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. People are suffering dramatically, and I do want to ask you about that inner peace, because when we talk about our Christian gospel and the power of God and the strength that can come when our relationship is right with Him, I do want to pursue those with you. But I do want to invite listeners to join in our conversation, so we will open our talkback lines and we'll take some calls as we're able. 1-800-316-316. Dr. Rudi Myhovych is our guest. He's a neurologist and president of the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine. He's here in Australia, a guest of the Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship of Australia. Let me give the website. That's cmdfa.org.au, cmdfa.org.au. We'll be talking about what sort of needs are there, and that will be your connecting point. Our special guest is Dr. Rudi Myhovych. He's a neurologist and president of the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine. We are talking about what life is like in Ukraine, in the war zone, and what special needs there may be. Rudi, I mentioned just before the break, I'd love to talk to you about the trauma that is being suffered by so many Ukrainians. With such death and destruction and the walking wounded, no doubt the PTSD issues, the post-traumatic stress disorder, people who are just not what they used to be. Sometimes we used to call it shell shock, and you seem to indicate that people are in a constant state of shell shock. I wonder if you've got any thoughts here about how people are coping with that war zone.
I'm not going to describe a super optimistic view because the situation is really, really challenging. And as a Christian organization, we're trying to came with a Christian perspective on solution because we strongly believe only God can give a peace. Doesn't matter what's going on, because that sometimes it's everything in Australia can be all right and you don't have a peace, but the same opposite. Everything can explode, the war, people are dying, but you can have inner peace and be okay. So that's why we, together with Christian organization in Netherlands and Dutch government, been able to organize a training for chaplains for mental health support. Because in this question, prevention is also important. And we train the chaplains that are responsible for spiritual, for mental stages of soldiers, to be able to overcome, to not face the troubles, the complications that they can. Right now we are training, we've already been trained more than 30, 40 chaplains, and we've been able to train more than 130, and it will impact on more than 60,000 soldiers, defenders that are fighting on the front. And it's not just theoretical help, it's actually practical with the gospel, with very practical view how we can, as our chaplains, can help and support, pray for our defenders.
Now, I would imagine that, when we talk about PTSD and the sorts of psychological challenges that people are facing in a war zone, and you're indicating you've got 40 chaplains or up to 40 chaplains already functioning, and no doubt not only with the civilian population but on the front lines with your soldiers, 60,000 fighters, I think you said. The need for more chaplains is quite significant. Is it hard to find people who are ready to be on the front lines with those fighters, chaplains who are ready to take this message of the gospel? And as you say, God can bring peace, and there's a peace that passes all understanding, and we all have appreciation of that. But is it hard to find chaplains to be trained up and to actually expose themselves to the dangers and be there alongside troops?
I would say no, it's not difficult to find. There's many people, and that is surprising me because it's dangerous. Again and again, it's only in films, it's beautiful and courageous. I have a friend who came from Germany. He's a young boy, 21 years old, strong, big, and he was like, I'm going to fight, I'm going to join the army. And he didn't enjoy it, but he was in evacuation. He is still in evacuation brigade. After first his rotation, he lost all his masculinity and said, Rudi, it's so fear, it's so stressful, it's so scary. And I'm surprised that our chaplains are ready to go. The bigger question was financial support of salaries, because everyone wants to donate to different things. But when we're talking about financial support of the family of the chaplain, sometimes they can go to army officially, but they also have limitations. So sometimes I know churches are supporting the chaplains to be on the front so they can exist. And and I think it's showing to us that how important it is to impact or emphasize not on resources, but put money in people, help people to help other people, and not just to buy the cars and facilities.
We know from our own Australian history the value of chaplains, as they have performed amazing duties on the front lines with soldiers in past wars. And I know that listeners can certainly identify as you're sharing the value of a chaplain that brings the presence of God and even the peace of God into very fearful situations. And I imagine, just to stay with the sort of stress that comes upon a life, the sort of trauma, because you've got not only those civilians with drone attacks and with mines, but those who are on the front line, who are fighting in the war, being exposed to death, to body parts, rape, torture and violence. There are deep psychological wounds, aren't there, that people suffer, and these are not easy to overcome, and it's not just like you take a pill and it's all gone. This is where the value of the Christian chaplain is so powerful, isn't it?
It is, because sometimes psychiatrists, they cannot answer on the challenges that people are facing. killing people, it's complicated, and you have moral, doesn't matter what you believe, atheist, believer, Christian, it's complicated. So you have to have other perspective, and it's so important. I was talking the other day with a psychiatrist, and he told people are coming to me and asking me, like, am I doing okay or bad? Because I don't want to kill people. And one day, why I'm telling that we are not just fighting with some Russia, we are fighting for good, for democracy. I was talking with a soldier, and he showed me the video of one of the attacks that they were doing. And at that fight, this Russian soldier killed one of the Ukrainian soldier, but Ukrainians got injured, the soldier, and they started to give him first aid. I was looking at video. It's not just some story, fairy tale. It's a video, and I was asking, how are you in such fight was able to find a humanity in you, inside of you, and give medical help to this soldier? He just killed your friend. I am, as a Christian, I don't know, would I have such a love and care about my opponent? And he told me, Rudi, if I would not do this, I would not forgive myself. And it's so important in such evil place to not lose humanity, and to see even in those opponent, aggressor, still see what you can. Because if we would continue to fight, yes, I would kill him. But he gave up, he gave his weapon away, and I tried to give him help.
Rudi, before we get into some other significant areas of what's developing, let me ask you about the biggest needs that you have as a Christian doctor. What are the things that you're facing right now, so far as whether it's physical needs, or we talked about, more doctors coming from around the world and participating in doing some work there in Ukraine? In your mind, what's the biggest need?
I think the biggest need for Ukraine and CMA, we ask you, change the perspective on looking at us. From helping to standing with us. From a position like we are holding hands for you, like to position we are want to succeed a common good outcome. What does it mean? So we need not only just a help, like some donations, money or in-kind donations. We need that you're be interested how it was spent, control it. Not only to CMA, but all other, we asking all other organizations, charities and government, help us to be better. And it means sometimes education. It means sometimes come to Ukraine and do operations together, train, because in such way, firstly, we will both be beneficial. You will learn something from us. We will learn definitely something from you. And because sometimes we are having this African approach when we give something, a shoebox, and we're happy with it, but we have to change it. And the war showed it that when you come into some country, you have to listen local needs and try to have a bigger, deeper impact. And it's impossible with just giving one shoebox.
So you can be actively involved in supporting efforts in the war in Ukraine by standing alongside the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine and making that a focal point. So any one of us here in Australia, and particularly those, I guess, with a focus on any areas around medicine, and caring for people who are deeply injured. Those are the sorts of people who are going to make the biggest impact, but ordinary people can stand alongside you as well. Let me ask you about one particular area that may be a very significant need, and that is for the support for burns victims. How significant is this that you'd like support for?
We have a huge challenge problem with burns. If you're going to get more than 50% of the body burns, the probability that you're going to survive less than 20. So 8 out of 10 will die if they get massive burn. And when we understood this huge problem, we said we have to do something. And we've been able to get approved from Taiwanese government to get $1.9 million grant for purchasing some of the Australian great product from one of the companies, BTM Artificial Skin. They gave us a good discount, praise the Lord, to make a purchase. But not only that, as I said, it's so important to do education. When we're talking how people can help, do at least something. It's so important. It's so important to do at least something, and from your something, God will multiply. God will bring from your small contribution something big. We can talk hours. I can sit with you hours just to give you example and telling you that this is so true, that when you're going to do something, God will do more. He wants collaboration, but it is impossible collaboration with God if you're not going to do something.
And often we think that we want to make a contribution in Christian mission, and we think of missionaries that will go abroad and will take the gospel. But what you're describing right now is an opportunity for listeners to our conversation today to be involved in a Christian mission enterprise by actually supporting in all of these different ways, actively being involved by standing with the Christian Medical Association of Ukraine in all of the needs that are there as war continues. And of course, burns victims are very much in need right now. And yes, we're all aware that Australia has been on the cutting edge with some of that technology with skin when there is burn conditions. Let me ask you about some other religious issues here. Religious freedom in Russia. And from my understanding here, Rudi, you've been called on from time to time to correct some of the misperceptions that people have about religious freedom in Russia under President Putin and in occupied territories. How do you see the church and religious freedom in Russia and what's happening in those nations?
Thank you so much for this question, because this is one of the topics that is hardly ever discussed. In democratic West, the people like to think that Russian, they are standing for Christian values against LGBT, abortion, and all other questions. But first of all, Christians are this faith that we need. Is this a Christian faith that we are looking for, our values? I don't think so. And second of all, Putin is using the church as a covering, and there is no God at his action at all. There's more tradition when we're talking about those questions, but definitely not a church. If you want to have more insight or understanding of this situation, you have to go into history. The challenge of Western society, we don't know the history. And Hitler did the same with the church. Read the Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which challenges he had during Hitler's rule. Hitler was using the church the same as a covering to bring God's word and church all over the country. And he was fighting with atheistic Soviet Union, covering the church, but truly it wasn't the church. They changed the cross on Hitler's swastika. The same in Russia. It's not a Orthodox Moscow church. It's Orthodox Putin church that been covered. His blessing, they praying for under rockets. He's using a system of priest on Ukraine as a spies. So sometimes you can hear that the Ukrainian government is taking those Russian Moscow Orthodox priests and put in the prison or close their churches, not because we don't have religious freedom. No, we can talk. I'm telling you, we have so much freedom, sometimes it's too much. And you can believe in whatever you want, but you cannot be a Russian spy. And I was thinking, why Russia on occupied territory have approach to Protestant pastors like they are American spies? Because they do it the same in Ukraine. And they put in prison some of the Protestant pastors. They close the churches and using right now as their politician point in Melitopol. And we see how church, especially Protestant church, are being closed. And yes, it's obvious fact that we can see and we can research and prove.
So when Putin is using the church as a covering, as you say, this is an interesting thing, and you are reflecting on history too, that when the church cozies up to leaders, the leader then uses the church. And when you describe the Russian church, the Orthodox church, as the Putin church, what you're saying is that the church is under the control of Putin, and that's why a separation of church and state needs to be a necessity. And when you've got priests then considered to be spies, particularly on the Protestant side, so if you're not in the Orthodox church, the state-run church of Putin, then you might be considered to be a spy, and so Protestants then become the outliers. They become the ones who are to be skeptical about. So when we talk about this separation of the church from the state, is there any hope, do you think, for the Russians to be able to get that separation back, or are they too far under the thumb of President Putin?
Oh, I want to have hope. I want to have hope, and without hope, you just will give up and stop to do something. And especially, I believe in the church. I believe the church is not the hand of man's. It's the business of God. It's his job and his creature, and he will take care. And as Hitler was punished by using the church as a covering for his propaganda, I believe that Putin is also going to be punished by that, not by people. And people didn't kill Hitler; he killed himself. God will do the justice. The question: what is going to do the church in that time? Will we help God, or will we be passive?
Well, let's get back to some of the issues around the challenge of all of the destruction that's going on, certainly throughout many parts of Ukraine. Caring for the wounded, which is what doctors do, caring for the wounded. As I understand it, that's getting harder and harder too, because just a month ago, an ambulance was hit by artillery fire. This sort of thing is a constant, ongoing concern when you're trying to care for the wounded?
Yes, all the time. Unfortunately, they are hunting for the ambulances, because if they're going to kill the medic, they will able to kill or injured 4 more other soldiers. Because when you find it without medical support, you are more afraid. You're going to get injury. You're not going to be given professional help. So they are hunting for medics. We were surprised by this. It's too awful. But when we were talking with people that were fighting with the Russian army in Syria and other countries, they said it's a normal practice that Russian army is using. They always try to hunt the medics, paramedics. So yes, thank God this my friend that he survived. He been under rehabilitation, and right now he come back to the front as giving help as a medic. Please continue to pray for him, because it's very devastating and complicated area, and he needs mental support, spiritual support, that God be with him.
Interesting, isn't it? Because we often will think of the medics and the paramedics, pardon me, as being in some ways neutral. But as you say, the Russian forces are targeting medics and paramedics, and hence you've got that evidence there with the Ukraine being hit, with the ambulance being hit by artillery. Let me just ask you, Rudi, something a little more personal, because you remain a civilian at this present time. And for listeners, I know listeners will be very surprised to hear that you are only 28 years old and you're leading this medical association there in Ukraine. But you remain a civilian now, but there is some risk that you yourself could even be conscripted to serve as a soldier. How does all that work?
Yes, I can be recruited to army and serve in army, and this is our reality. And for me, it was a big question: what should I do? Should I stay in the country? Should I leave? What should I do? Of course, I can be recruited as a doctor and help as a doctor, but for us, it's right now everyone. The difference, look, the big difference between democracy country and totalitarian dictatorship countries. Democracy countries, they always they want to have a motivation and all other. The dictators country, they're not asking about motivations. They just telling you, we're going to kill you or you have to go to the front. And this is a difference. And this, I think, sometimes, and even I'm thinking, maybe people are thinking about our organization, oh, Rudi, it's not so bad. People, it's even worse than that I can describe you. Sometimes even I don't know all awfulness of what's going on about raping children, men's captured soldiers, killing. It's horrible. And I'm weeping and asking people to join, to help, not because of Ukrainian, because I'm telling you, if you're not going to stop evil in one place, it's going to spread as disease all over the world. And this is what I'm afraid. We will pay for our freedom and our land. But I'm telling you, you will also pay if you're not going to do something right now to stop the evil. Everyone, it's all over the world. We can see it in Middle East, Israel, in Taiwan and China. It will happen if we're not going to stop right now.
As you say, it spreads like a poison, and that's why the battle in Ukraine is a battle that the whole world needs to be focused on and even involved in ways that are obviously going to preserve peace in those other states while that peace is being preserved. But as you say, things get out of hand and the whole world will be involved in what will eventually potentially be a World War III. The people of Ukraine, Rudi, their support for President Volodymyr Zelensky, how is that support going? Is there any waning support, or is your leader still considered to be something of a hero to the Ukrainian people?
Again, we're a democratic country. Only in dictatorship country you have one leader that everyone likes. So in our country, you can tell anything about Zelensky, Zaluzhny, or any other our leaders. And we don't have, and the same in Australia or United States, you can tell whatever you want. So absolutely, in the beginning, the first years, we were much more supportive of Zelensky. But when time go on, we see the mistakes of decision or mistakes of communication, government with civilians. And of course, in the times of recent news, maybe you heard about conflict between Zelensky and Zaluzhny. It's something that disturbs us. This politician battlefield that can be still majority support Zelensky because he showed up as a leader who will not leave the country in the most crucial time and will be ready to die for the values that we believe in. Of course, time go on and different challenges, but I think it's not a question of Zelensky or Zaluzhny. It's a question of people that are ready to fight. Doesn't matter who's going to be as a leader.
And those values that are being fought for, as you say, Ukrainians don't want a Russian rulership over them, and there is a real passion for defending that homeland in Ukraine. Let me move on to the next generation, because as Ukraine is losing a generation of young men, children become a focus because there now are a significant number of children who've been orphaned, who've become wards of the state. So far as your role there, is there any thought or any comment that you've got around what's happening to the children of Ukraine?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for asking the question. It's a very important question. First of all, my church, we have a ministry for orphanage, and we're helping. And this is one of the messages that I want to Australian churches. Find Ukrainian church that you can partnership and create a sisterhood program to help individual church that will help you understand a more real needs, because it's not just far away. It will help you to understand what every church can do and multiply their work. So my church is doing a lot of job with orphanage, and it's increasingly number when people children are losing parents or parents are losing children. But other moment that I want to talk, it's about it's been approved by international independent court and in inspection that Russians they kidnapping children, and this is what is really horrible. When we're talking about, oh, the Russian is not so bad, we know them. No, look at them. They're kidnapping children and they're brainwashing them. They're telling, we are taking you to camp and we will spend time with you. And they're telling, oh, your parent, they gave up you because you're a Russian-speaking child, or they don't care about you, and they left to Ukraine. So they hate their parents. They feel gave up, and yeah, they brainwash them. More than 3,000 children have been kidnapped already.
Kidnapped children, and of course then the so many more who have been orphaned and become wards of the state because they've lost parents. Just very quickly, the churches, I know that some churches have closed, others have become sanctuaries for people who've been displaced. Churches in general, have you got an overall just an image of the work of churches, those that are continuing to function in Ukraine?
Yes, and I'm telling you, sometimes we people think church is weak, but I want to really encourage you. Church is strong, especially in complicated time, in such dark time. The light of the gospel can be lighter, and church is growing, even in the most difficult area when it was less than 50 members. Right now, there are more than 200 members in small village church, and church became a physical and spiritual shelter. Sometimes we provide help, food, clothes, mental support. Church is a family, and in this time, you need a family.
You need a family, and just on another personal note there too, Rudi, you're here in Australia and you're a guest of the Australian Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship, but you've left your wife back in Ukraine to make this visit to Australia, and as I understand it, you're missing the birthday of your 3-year-old son. So special honour to you, because here you are talking to us and you're missing a very important birthday, the 3-year-old birthday for your son. I know that there'll be listeners who would like to stand alongside you, and I'm going to give the website in just a moment for the Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship of Australia. You've got a very good relationship with the Australian Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship. This is something that's continuing, and no doubt there are medicos coming from Australia, and they're supporting some of the effort that's going on to care for Ukrainians who are under such hardship at this time. Have you got a special message at all for those listeners right now who are thinking, maybe I can do something to be a help? What would you say to encourage those listeners?
So firstly, continue to pray. We don't see the end of the war. Be ready for a long time. Be patient, but continue to pray. I believe that only God's miracle can finish it and help us. Second, please support Australian Christian Medical Association because we are great partners, and I believe if even small contribution but stable contribution can help and support and make a difference. I'm telling you, the mustard seed parable, it's about not a big fruit. It's about small step of faith that we have to do, everyone. And with small step, it's going to be big changes. I saw it, and I can prove you it. And third, do something. Do something. Just decide not to be passive, but do something. Pray. Text to Aaron Crocker, that wonderful partner to us. They've been praying for us for a long, long period, and I'm extremely grateful to them, and especially to Aaron. Connect with Dr. Lara. Aaron will tell you to also maybe to her more how you can help. So we are grateful for already what you're doing. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Some wonderful identities, Ernest Crocker and Lara, as you mentioned, people that you'll connect with when you go to the website of the Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship of Australia. Let me give that website, because no doubt there'll be some listeners right now who are saying, I've never even heard of the Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship of Australia. I need to be connected right now. So here's the website, cmdfa.org.au. That's the initials of the Christian Medical and Dental Fellowship of Australia, and this wonderful connection to the Christian Medical Association in Ukraine. And that's the association that Dr. Rudi Myhovych is leading right now. And Rudi, I must say, just humbly, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today on 2020. Australian listeners have no doubt appreciated coming in behind the scenes and recognising just how significant the conflict is and how dreadful those stories are that are emerging from a war zone. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us and with listeners today on 2020.
Thank you so much for asking to come. It's an honor to be and talk. It's also extremely important not to stop, because sometimes the devil wants the truth to be stopped. But we as a Christian, I think we have to fight for the truth.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.